Welcome to Make EdTech 100. I'm Lindy Hawk, educator, K-12 EdTech advisor, and your host. This is a podcast where we keep it real about what actually works in classrooms. No hype, no overwhelm, just practical strategies, honest stories, and tools that make a real difference for teachers and students. So come along with me on a journey to make EdTech 100. Today's guest has quite the titles and accolades. Dr. Stacy Hawthorne is the executive director of the EdTech Leaders Alliance. She's the chief academic officer at Learn 21 and serves as the chair of the COSIN Board of Directors. She also has past roles that include director of online learning and leader of digital learning program development across the U.S. She holds a doctorate in educational technology. I can't imagine someone with better credentials or accolades to talk Make EdTech 100 with us today. Welcome, Stacy. What else do listeners need to know about you?
I guess I bore easily. That's why I do so many different things. But I think the thing that a lot of people don't know, education is a second career for me. I am a first generation college graduate. My husband's a first generation college graduate, grew up in poverty and just saw education as a way to better our lives. And I am passionate about education and making sure that people have access to it and that it's meaningful and engaging and it drives them to where they want to go. I chose to be in education. My undergraduate was actually in business and went back and changed fields because I liked who I was at the end of the day when I worked in education, when I volunteered in my kids' classroom or other things at the school or just made bulletin boards for the PTO, that kind of thing. And so it changed my life. And then I chose to be an educator because I wanted to make sure that other people had that opportunity. So
you're so involved in the education space. I forgot that. And I can't imagine you being anything other than super involved in education.
It's funny because every once in a while, particularly on the coast and border, different places, I'll make a comment and very rarely somebody will be like, education wasn't your first career, was it? And I was like, no, why? And they're like, because you're looking at it from a different lens and a lot of people wouldn't have that extra lens. So I'm very grateful that I have my business degree, but I definitely don't want to go back and work in business.
It definitely gives you a different lens. I always say that about my work. I'm kind of the bridge between education and technology because I have the teaching experience. I've worked in schools. I'm in schools all the time, but I'm also talking to ed tech companies and dove into the tech world. So you get a different perspective and you kind of have a foot on each side of the bridge, which is very healthy. Different perspectives are very healthy to have.
Yeah.
I named the podcast Make EdTech 100 because that meaning is very open to interpretation. So I ask every guest to tell us, what does Make EdTech 100 mean to you?
Okay, but I promise you I'm going to give you an answer that's different than anything you've ever got. Part of it's because I'm going to date myself. But the first thing I thought of when I saw the title of the podcast is it reminded me of a scene in Spinal Tap, the movie. And it's the scene where Nigel goes, this is louder. It goes to 11 and it just goes one louder. And he's buying an amp and the guy, I'm going to explain it because a lot of people probably haven't seen Spinal Tap. I highly recommend rushing out and watching it if you haven't, and never telling anybody that I'm the one that recommended you watch that movie.
Okay, I got it. Spinal Tap. I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah. You can even just Google "it goes to 11" and you'll get the video scene. Okay. He's trying to buy an amp and the guy's like, showing him an amp. And Spinal Tap is a rockumentary, so it's a fake documentary of a rock band. So it takes things to extreme. And so the guy's like, this amp goes to 10 and it's louder. And the guy goes, but this one, the rocker goes, this Nigel goes, this goes to 11. And the guy's like, well, what does that mean? He goes, well, it means it's one louder. Like it has to be one louder because it goes to 11. Doesn't matter what the scale is. This one's one loud. So anyway, that was probably longer than I needed to milk that. But Make EdTech 100 to me means making it one louder, like giving your full effort, not being halfway about how you're doing things, not taking the growth opportunities and the changes because they're unprecedented right now defensively, not using fear as our driver. It just means making EdTech intentional, responsible, creative, student-centered, and something that families can trust in our education. So just one louder to me.
I love it. All right, I've never seen Spinal Tap. I will be watching it now. So thank you for the movie recommendation. So you are writing a book.
I am.
Exciting. Tell us about it. Whatever you
Yeah.
can tell us without spoilers.
Yeah. So I describe myself as a reluctant author because I wrote a dissertation and said when I finished that 220 pages that was it. But the truth of the matter is, I got really pissed off. And I got pissed off because everybody's coming at our screens and they don't understand what really good technology means to students and classrooms and educators. And so I was talking with Keith Kruger, who's the CEO of COSIN, and we're like, what do we do? How do we support our members? I mean, COSIN is a professional organization for K-12 CTOs and tech directors, so technology is instrumental in our world. And so the conversation was, how do we support our members? And I said, what if we wrote a book and we just started interviewing districts across the US, kind of like a qualitative study, and hearing what they're actually doing with technology and how it's actually positively impacting students. And we turned those stories into a book. And Keith's like, oh, you could do that. And so that's why I describe myself as a reluctant author. But it's more than a book, it's a project because I've been so inspired by the stories and what I'm hearing. And you know this because you're in schools and you're working with technology. I literally get chills every single interview. And so the book will come out this summer. But the project won't end. So COSIN is partnering with me. And so they're turning stories that are in the book into blogs. I'm going to continue to do interviews so we can get more blogs. I'm doing video interviews similar to this type of style. And they're taking pieces of that and turning it into video vignettes. Because the goal of the book is not to sell books. The goal of the book is to reclaim the narrative and share the positive stories that are happening in EdTech in the world. And so if somebody buys the book, that's great. If somebody ever buys the book and asks me to autograph it, that's going to be super weird. But if somebody doesn't want to buy a book and they want to read a blog or they want to watch a little video vignette, as long as they get that story, I'm going to be satisfied. So it's more of a bigger project, and it's about the full name is Purposeful Technology, Powerful Learning. You can't ban possibility because I like a little snark on things. So it really is about that. And I don't want to discount the people that have shared negative experiences that their children have had on school issued devices because those are real lived experiences as well, and those need to be addressed. But you and I both know that shouldn't happen. That's not good educational technology use. And so we need to address that and do better across the board. But also we need to say, here's what's really happening too.
So this is going to be, I lost count, the sixth or seventh, fifth, sixth, seventh, somewhere around there, episode in this screen time debate series I've been doing. And some common themes that have been coming up is that we do need to question screen time because there are a lot of bad uses of screen time out there, but just doing a blanket ban and calling all technology under one umbrella of screen time is really damaging and discounts the really powerful ways that we can use it. Again, without sharing spoilers, no spoilers for your book, can you share any of those stories about how EdTech is supporting and inspiring students with us?
Yeah, so I'm just two, and these are the most recent chapters I've written up. I, for the most part, concluded all the interviews, and we're just in the writing process right now, and that should conclude by the end of this month, and then it'll go to the editor. The thing that's really interesting to me is the stories and the conversations that I'm having remind me, most importantly, that the conversation about screen time has to be more nuanced than screens are good and screens are bad. Like that's not the line. It's not the screen. The screen is an instructional tool. So a couple of really cool things that I've written up in the last week. The school district of La Crosse in Wisconsin, they have the world's first Apple Vision Pro rollout at scale. Like a small school district in Wisconsin, Apple Vision Pro. And students are using that immersive technology to experience places, careers, possibilities that they literally could never have in their physical building because of limitations of the actual building itself. So I literally never thought when I went through started doing this, back in November, that somebody would say, oh, we have a scale rollout of Apple Vision Pros. was like, what? I didn't see that. And I love it. In Illinois, North Shore District 112, their eighth graders built AI tools. One of them actually won the AI challenge for the state of Illinois and is competing at the national level.
The
They have,
presidential one?
yeah,
The
yeah,
presidential
that's
AI
exactly
challenge?
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They're questioning the use of technology. They put students on their technology committee to help actually write the district board policy that governs AI use, to the point where students and board members were on this committee together, and board members would leave a comment in the working doc and a student would counter that and say, here's why. And then the student's comment would be the one that ended up making it into the board policy. So they weren't just put on there as let's have some students and rubber stamp our policy. They were put on there as leaders. And they're not passive users of technology. I mean, they're not what you hear in the media who likes to portray, high schoolers as students who use AI to cheat and not do their assignments. Like, that's not what's happening. There's so much good that's happening in these stories.
The Apple Vision Pro one. So when you say at scale, are they like 1-to-1? Every kid has an Apple Vision Pro?
So every kid in a class has an Apple Vision Pro. So when they go to that class, they all have them. And what's really interesting, a teeny bit of a spoiler, so if you want to pause and fast forward, you can do that. But they started out with a vision to get 5, and then they expanded it to 15 and went to 30, like ding, 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 not like we have 5 to see what it's doing. And the biggest reason that the leadership team did that is they didn't want the device to be a reward. And if you have a station of 5 and kids are going, those 5 get to play with the Apple Vision Pro and everybody else is doing a worksheet or whatever else it is, it becomes a reward system. Yep. And so they wanted it to be an integral part of the curriculum and the pedagogy in the way that they deliver the curriculum. And so that was why they made that decision to go with that larger rollout. So every student has one, and it's a part of what they're doing in class. It's not extra.
That is another theme that's come out, I feel like, in this series I've been doing, is that if you are only using technology as a reward or for early finishers, then you probably are questioning the use of technology as a learning tool, because it's that is not the best way to use it. And I was thinking the other day about, okay, if you're only using technology for your early finishers, I shared in a couple episodes ago, I was telling the person, Debbie, that I was interviewing, that a small piece of me dies when I share a really powerful tool with teachers and then we reflect on how they could use it. And the reflection is, well, I could have my early finishers do this. So I was thinking about that more, and I was like, oh, that's not good all around, because now guess what you're doing is the other kids that take longer to complete their work, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, are now going to speed up and not focus on their work or disengage, because they're like, wait, if I get done early, I get to go do that really fun thing with that tool. Like, so not good instructional practice, not good use of this really powerful instructional tool that we have.
Yeah. Can I share a quick story on that?
Please do.
Years ago, went into education, and then was teaching gifted ed, and had a really fortunate situation where I was working for a district that had some funds left over, and my gifted coordinator said, hey, what do you want? And I can buy you some stuff. And so I came up with this idea of a classroom set of iPod touches. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, blah, blah, blah. Before anybody asked, again, dating myself, I came up with this decision because the iPad had yet to be invented. So the iPod Touch seemed like a really good classroom kind of thing. And so I had that. It had an amazing year teaching. Within a couple of weeks, the gifted coordinator cut my schedule back. I was only teaching in the morning, and the rest of the day, I was literally going to every other building in the district, showing them how to teach with a classroom set of iPod Touches, because we saw immediately some positive effects. The next year, I got offered the position of technology director, which is how I got into technology leadership. So I always joke I got that position because I was the first teacher in the state of Ohio to teach with an iPod Touch. I'm like, oh, want to be our tech director? Great. But so I bought iPod Touches for our different buildings and things in that role. And I got a call one afternoon from a principal, panicked because some kids were doing things on the iPod Touch that they shouldn't have been doing. I mean, they were elementary school, really low level, but not school use kind of stuff. And so I run over to the school and I'm like, what happened? I'm talking to the teacher, and she says, well, these are my gifted kids and they finished early. And so I told them to take the iPods and go over in the corner and see what they could figure out. And I was like, well, they did exactly what you told them to do. What was the instructional purpose? Why did we
Surprise,
have these out?
surprise.
Right. And and again, the snark runs deep in me. And I looked at her and I was like, would you have given them a box of pencils and told them to go figure out what they could do in a corner? And she was like, well, no, that's ridiculous. I'm like, okay, you just did that, but you gave them an open door to the world and did it at the same time. And so it really is not about the tool. It's about the pedagogy and the purpose and it being instructionally driven and opportunities for access for all. So I 100% agree with you. And I every time that story comes up, I'm like, yeah, I gave my gift to kids some iPod and told them go figure out what they could do with it.
So often when I'm working with teachers or I'm talking with them, we tend to think of technology differently and approach it differently. And in some ways, you need to do that. But really, all of the foundational elements of being a good teacher still apply. Like I talk to teachers about, well, if it didn't go well using this tech tool as an instructional tool, did you scaffold in the learning? Well, no, we just jumped in and used it for an assessment. I'm like, well, I use the analogy of you have to have a practice before the big game, right? If you were playing sports, you never just go have a baseball game or a volleyball game before you have practices. And actually, most state organizations require you to have a minimum number of practices before you go have the
So
big
kids
game.
don't get hurt.
Yeah. So I'm like, let's back up and let's look at how you would use math manipulative blocks, right? Would you just jump in and hand students math manipulative blocks and have a test? And that's the first time that they've ever touched those manipulative blocks. Well, no. I'm like, well, then why did you do it with the tech tool? Yeah. So I don't know what it is. There's just something about technology that overwhelms people. Most maybe, I don't know. I think I can still say most teachers confidently were never taught.
They're still not taught
as a learner.
Programs. Yeah, pre-service programs still don't.
Well, both.
Yeah.
Yes. They never experienced it as a learner of how to use technology in really powerful ways. Like they may have had tech, but it was for things like a reward or early finishers, or we might have walked down to the computer lab and had a few days a year in the computer lab type of thing, maybe, or maybe we did have like a Chromebook or an iPad cart, but it sat and collected dust type of thing. So there's that. And then there's the teacher prep element that, yeah, most teacher prep programs just aren't. You might have one educational technology class, which to me is kind of a travesty in multiple scenarios. It's a travesty because if you only have one class on it, it should be embedded in everything. It should be in every methods course. It should be in every classroom management course. It should be in every assessment course that you take. It's not a standalone course. That's like saying that you're going to have a course in college specifically on how to use math manipulative blocks. We would never do that. Instead, it's part of your math methods course.
Totally agree.
I wanted to ask you more about this iPod Touch business. So I'm curious, like, what kind of things were you doing on the iPod Touch, excuse me.
It was really early. A lot of it was, some of it was surface level. Two examples that I'll share. I taught math and accelerated math. So I would go down to the elementary school in the morning and teach the kids that needed middle school math. And then I would go to the middle school and teach the kids that needed high school math. And so at the elementary school, there was an app that was tic-tac-toe, but it was called Tic-Tac-Math. And so when I'm teaching fractions in, a previous year, kids would have gotten a worksheet to practice their fractions and show mastery. And now I can do tic-tac-math. I'm not suggesting this was, years ago. I'm not suggesting kids do tic-tac-math today, but it was great then. But I can go into each iPod and I could say, okay, these students are good with addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and mixed numbers, and set that up. And so two students would just sit the iPod in between of them and play tic-tac-toe. But before you could put your X and O, you had to solve the problem. So they're getting immediate feedback. They're doing the math problems. They're collaborating with each other and having conversations about how they solve the problem. I can personalize it for these students. Okay, well, they're good with addition, subtraction, multiplication, but no mixed numbers, And so you can personalize at what level they're getting it, and they're getting that immediate feedback. And I used to make the joke, and it's still true. Like, I could have given kids a worksheet, and within 5 minutes, I've got behavior problems because they're not engaged and they're not motivated and they don't see the relevance. Or I could give them this Tic Tac Math app, and they're doing the exact same thing they would have been doing on worksheets, but with some engagement and personalization built into it. So it's not complete substitution. And they would, I could have left the building and gone and got a pedicure and come back, and they would be playing Tic Tac Math because they were having so much fun with it. So, I mean, it's that engagement piece. Another one that I really, really liked is when I was co-teaching with a social studies teacher who's amazing. She had a seventh grade class where they studied Renaissance, the Renaissance period, and part of that was the Renaissance art. And so every year, she would show a PowerPoint of different Renaissance art pictures and do a whole class discussion on it. And she's like, she came to me, she's like, the kids check out, they hate this, they don't want to look at the pictures, I'm picking the pictures. And so we worked together and we found a museum that had an app with Renaissance art on it where they could go through and scroll and look at Renaissance art pictures. So we put the kids in pairs. We gave them an iPod with the Renaissance art picture on it. And now they're able to navigate through and look at the different pictures that they want to see and what they connect with, and have some choice in that lesson. And they're having real conversations about, well, why are all the women heavy? Like, oh, why? Because today we wouldn't look at a bunch of heavy women in pictures and say, oh, that's great art. Everybody wants a skinny model. They want a Kate, whatever her name is. So it was just allowed that choice and allowed them to have conversations that she can't have when she's doing whole class instruction for 30 students. And so the quality of their work went up. So, I mean, those are just two super simple examples from early 2000s, but it shows, how the technology allows students to interact with the curriculum, still tied to state standards, still tied to what they're going to be tested on, but in a way that is more engaging and a little bit more personalized for them.
And you did that all on a tiny little iPod Touch. They were
Yeah.
like this big,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I worked with this teacher who taught special education in a middle school, and we did a Kindle reading, a book reading project, and I think it was on Kindle back then even. And the kids, many of them still had an iPod Touch, or they had some type of early cell phone or something back then. And they knew that they could play apps and games on their touches, but they never knew they could read a book on their touch. And so for the
Mm.
students that were in her special education class, the full access to the dictionary, like right there in the book when they're reading, was so powerful versus when they were trying to read on a paperback. They could still highlight text. And if a student preferred to read on a paper book, we would still give them a paper book. But for the students that wanted that access, and it was a light bulb moment for them because they saw that iPod Touch as a toy, and we opened up an avenue where it was a portal to a bigger world and an opportunity for learning. And literally, it was early, and none of the kids knew like they could read a book on the Kindle, like on the iPod Touch. But yeah, it was yeah. I keep thinking they're the size of my iPhone today, but they're probably a lot smaller.
I feel like they were. I mean, those of you that are listening and not watching, I held up about, I don't know, like 2 inches wide was
Yeah.
all, and maybe like 4 inches tall is how I remember the iPod Touch. I love that example because two things. One, you were modeling proper use. I did a whole episode on this. I think it was the second episode in this series of this idea that we have to explicitly teach healthy and responsible technology use. And that's a perfect example. They were using their iPod Touch to play games and play music, right? Listen to music. They had no idea that you could download an app and read a book on that. You just,
Right.
like you said, you opened a whole new world to them. And they took that into, then we went from iPod Touch to iPhone to iPad. I think we had
Yeah.
iPhone before iPad, right?
Yeah, I think
And
so.
then or if they went to an Android phone or an Android tablet, they
Anyway.
now know that you can read a book on those type of devices. So that is great. First off, second thing is it opened up an opportunity for you to provide multiple means of representation. And for those of you that aren't familiar with UDL, we talked about that in the last episode. It's a huge part of it is you want to give students access to content in multiple different formats. So
Yeah.
if you want to read a physical book, you can. If you want to read a digital book, you can. digital books transform reading for so many people that are dyslexic, dysgraphic,
Or if you want to listen to
for
an
example,
audiobook.
listen to an audiobook. Yeah, exactly. It really, really, really can. And it can be the difference between a student intaking content and information and just not intaking content and information. That teeny little tweak of just
Yeah.
giving them a different option to get that information.
I have a Kindle. I read it literally every weekend in the pool. It's my favorite thing. Behind me, I have a bookshelf full of a bunch of professional books because I'll still buy paper books because I want to sit down and highlight different things. And there are times that I'll listen to certain kinds of books on audio. So 100%. Like even as one individual, there are times that I want a different medium for each of those things. So
I have a Kindle. I love it. It goes everywhere with me. I buy any fiction book I buy as an ebook on my
yeah,
Kindle. But nonfiction, I really like to have that
same.
physical book. So actually on my nightstand by my bed right now, I have my Kindle sitting there and I'm reading a fiction book on it. And under my Kindle is a nonfiction book about AI literacy and integrating AI literacy into core curriculum. So, and I'm flipping back and forth between the two, the Kindle and the physical book. So, yeah, perfect examples. Now, back to talking about the book. I'm curious if you are finding any commonalities in the stories that you're hearing.
I am, and it's actually our little sidetrack there is probably a good segue for this piece too. So, um, the biggest commonality is there's not a single district that I've interviewed that started with the technology. Every single one of them started with a learning problem. So in lacrosse, the question was, how do we give students an experience in this small physical building that we can't normally provide? Apple Vision Pro is the answer. In North Shore, they wanted to know, how do we help students understand and shape AI instead of just reacting to it? Because they were seeing a lot of that. Another school in Ohio, Delaware City Schools, they wanted to help move students from consuming content to creating things meaningfully. So every single one of those started with a learning problem, not with the technology. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot of is that the technology is not replacing teachers. It's making more powerful teaching possible. And it kind of goes to what you were talking about earlier, like the teacher's still very important. The adults are still designing the learning, they're setting up the guardrails, they're building culture and helping students make meaning out of the technology. The tech's just opening a door that wasn't there before. And then I'm also seeing a pattern that I've also personally really held is an education philosophy is that when you set the bar high, students will achieve to a bar high. And so in this case, students are rising to the occasion when adults are trusting them with real tools and responsibilities. So they're leading immersive tools, they're building AI applications, they're writing policy, they're designing physical products, they're troubleshooting problems, they're supporting one another. Like that's all stuff that you're going to see in the Portrait of a Graduate and the World Economic Forum Future Job Reports, like what do employers want. And every single story is pushing back on the idea that students are simply passive users of technology, that they're just doom scrolling. Because when the learning's well designed, they're engaged creators, they're problem solvers, and they're the kind of leaders we actually want to develop in schools. So that's the stuff that I'm seeing, regardless of what the tool is that they're using to get there.
So that's interesting that it sounds like all of these districts started with a problem and then technology was the answer. They didn't say, we're going to go one to one Apple Vision Pros and then just figure out how these fit into instruction and curriculum. It
Right.
was the other way around. Is that correct?
Yeah, and like the school in La Crosse, it's a small building. They don't have a hood in their science lab. So how do you do high school
Mm.
science without a hood in
What?
your
Really?
science lab?
Wow. Okay. I
So
guess
yeah,
I say really, and then I live in Montana, and
yeah,
you're right. There's probably the majority of science classrooms in Montana don't have hoods.
yeah. They had a problem and that they needed to solve. So they're using technology as a part of the solution, but they're also using teachers and solid pedagogy as part of that solution too. It's not like, oh, I don't have a hood, let's buy some Vision Pros.
Interviewed Dr. Michelle Eckler
Love
two
her.
episodes ago, I believe. Yeah, great. It was a great episode. And she said that hate to blame the pandemic, and I'm paraphrasing her, hate to blame the pandemic, but what happened during the pandemic is it forced all of this technology because it was either that or send paper packets home, and then how do you get it there, and all of the things. So we kind of have this forced one-to-one situation happen. And now, so what, 6 years? I think we're about 6 years after the start of the pandemic. We're now, I think, seeing the effects of a lack of implementation, a lack of professional development, and going the opposite way, right? We didn't identify a problem and the technology fit into it. We were kind of forced with a problem.
We look for a
And
medium.
yeah, yeah. So just an interesting thing to think about.
One of the interviews I had, the person made a really good point, and she said we were 1-to-1 years before COVID, and a lot of school districts were 1-to-1 before COVID. A lot weren't, but a lot were. And she said the difference is every time we use technology pre-COVID, there was a purpose, there was an instructional
Mm,
purpose, and the technology was just one of the tools to help make that a better experience for students. She said during COVID, we lost our through line on the technology, and it was just use the technology, not where's your purpose first. And so getting back to that, where's our purpose first?
yep. I also think I have a book on online learning,
I have
and
it
that
up there.
came to
It's on my
life. Oh,
shelf.
yeah, awesome. Okay, there you go. It came to life during the pandemic because I was getting, frantic emails and messages from educators for help, and I was creating all these resources, and then kind of same as you, it just kind of like I wasn't a total reluctant author, but I never planned to write a book.
Yeah.
But it just came together that I had all these stories, all these resources, and just ended up in 340-page book. But one of the things I say at the very beginning is that it wasn't online learning, it was basically emergency
Yeah.
learning. And that if you're trying to take your face to face course and plug it into an online format, it just absolutely isn't going to
Doesn't work.
work. And I think that created a lot of negative thoughts, feelings, ideas about what technology can and can't do. And we really do need to do a backtrack.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, really do a ton of professional development. That was what Debbie and I talked about in last week's episode is teachers, they were never taught this way. Like I just said, they're not taught in most teacher prep programs, and it's not something that just happens. It takes a lot of time and effort and thought and skill to figure out how to purposefully integrate technology into your curriculum.
Well, and prior to COVID, during COVID as well, but prior to COVID, I was a director of online learning for a fully online public school that operated across all 50 states. And I was originally hired as the strategist to help design the school and build it. Long story, but anyway, super cool opportunity. And so in that design and building the strategic plan and creating what that online model was going to be like, I spent a year of research, like working
Mm.
at the physical school version that they had of this school that they wanted to do. And I was like, all right, we need to change this, we need to change this, we need to do this. Like, and so it's completely different than their physical school, but the expectations are the same, and but it's delivered. So the physical school has classes Monday through Thursday, the regular core courses and electives on Fridays. And the online school, and those met for 1 hour each time they met. I did Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday classes, 90 minutes at a time. I had to work with teachers to teach them, like, okay, and they're synchronous sessions, so it's a very synchronous online model. You have your kids for 90 minutes. That is time that they're collaborating with each other. They're looking at their classmates from across the country. You cannot lecture during that 90-minute time. Like, you can give 5 minutes of instructions here and there. You need to break up activities. I had to teach them how to teach differently in that model. And the first couple of months, they were like, oh my God, 90 minutes with the kid. And then next year, I'm like, okay, do we need to change the schedule? Like, why would you cut my 90 minutes back? We love our 90 minutes, So it was so funny. But it was online before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. And so our students literally never got a single day off of school. But during COVID, it hit just at the spring break for this school. And so my teachers gave up their entire spring break to help their counterparts in the physical school try to get everything online. And my teachers were so busy trying to teach them how to do everything that they do. And I said, guys, there was a year of research before we came up with this model, and then a year of training y'all before we even let students in. You can't do that to them in a week. This is emergency remote instruction, and you need to give them enough to survive and, not talk about it. And so you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's not the same. A really well-designed online school is completely different than whatever happened during COVID. And there are benefits to really well-designed online programs, and there are benefits to really well-designed in-person instruction programs as well.
Yep. 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years to research and plan an online school. I think that's the perfect example of, if you're an educator listening to this and your whole view on using technology as a learning tool was molded during that emergency remote instruction during the pandemic, please, please, please don't completely put it out of your mind. There's lessons to learn there, but please don't let that drive your whole thoughts, opinions about what it's like to use technology as a learning tool. It's just not the case. So the book, you're collecting, are you done collecting stories? Or are you still collecting stories?
So the form is still open. People can still submit. They may not make it in the book, but they'll make it in, like I said, this is a project now, not a book. So it's, they'll go in the blogs, they'll go in videos.
Okay.
I don't want to say there won't be a second book, but if there could possibly be a second book. Again, I'm a reluctant author. So as long as the stories get out there. But if there really is a demand for a second book in, a year, I can make that happen. But I don't want the story collecting to stop, because we need to continue to reclaim that narrative.
If people want to contribute a story, you can go to bit.ly/edtechforgood. I will put that in the show notes. How can people get the book this summer?
It will be on Amazon when it's released, and I believe Barnes and Noble. Then if that bit.ly/edtech for good, and you spell the words out and you spell them all correctly, because that's how old I am. There's two options. One is you can sign up to get updates about the book. And then the other is you can click to say, I want to submit a story. So if you sign up for updates, I'll obviously email you and tell you the book is available. It will be out this summer.
I will put this in the show notes as well, but the book is called Purposeful Technology, Powerful Learning.
You can't ban possibility.
I do want to ask you, before we switch gears, one more question about this. I have been doing this whole screen time series and of the podcast, and then I'm posting lots of clips from the podcast on my social media channels, and I'm getting, not a lot, but some educators that are very vocal that are in the, no, we think we should just completely get rid of devices, or maybe not completely get rid of devices, but go back to like computer labs or shared carts, pretty much in the, like, we need to go back to paper and pencil camp. Are you getting any of that in response to this?
I have not at all. I have had somebody engage with me on social media that definitely had an axe to grind about something. And so it was just one of those times I'm just like, you just keep going, and I'm not going to continue this conversation because it's not being productive. Not that I wouldn't, if people are willing to listen, I'm totally happy to have that conversation. Okay, so I'll say two things. Let me back up just a little bit. So I was having a conversation with somebody at the COSIN conference, and he said to me something I hadn't thought of before. And you hear a lot of teachers, or some teachers will say, well, I'm just not good with technology. Would we allow a teacher to teach and say, I'm just not good with English, so I'm not going to teach English? And we wouldn't. And so technology is like English today. Like, you have to be proficient at it, or you can't get a job. You can't apply for benefits. There's so many things that you can't do if you don't have technology. And I know, because my mom struggles with technology, and it's really limited access to things for her. So we can't not teach with it. But do you have to teach with it all day, every day? Absolutely freaking not.
Oh, you shouldn't.
Exactly. It shouldn't be everything. I remember years ago at an ISTE, a superintendent had just invested in one-to-one, long pre-COVID, He was complaining that he walked by a classroom in his building and nobody was on their devices. And he was, talking about how bad it was. And I said, how do you know it was bad? And he's like, well, nobody was on their device. I said, but what were they doing in the classroom? Was a device essential? I said, walking by a classroom and seeing everybody on a device or nobody on a device doesn't tell you whether it's good or bad. Like what's happening in that classroom and what's that pedagogy. So this is one of the things we really talk about at COSIN is local control of these decisions. It's another reason we don't want blanket bans, because you take the hands out of local control. And so local control means the teacher saying, I'm not teaching with technology today because it's not meaningful to what we're doing. I will say, one of the districts that I interviewed, Meriden, Connecticut, they were actually pushing back on cell phone bans, their teachers and their administrators, not because they want kids on social media during the day on their cell phones. They do not. They were very, very good educators and really good people, but they reframed it because they feel like when the things are banned, that it loses the opportunity for teaching digital literacy, and there are students understanding when it's appropriate to use a device and when it's not appropriate to use a device, because we just said everything is bad. And so they are like, we don't even like cell phone bans. Now, I don't get a lot of districts that are pushing back on cell phone bans, but that was interesting to see their leadership team and their teachers, were like, hey, we're not all in on this. So
interesting. That's basically, I think it's the second episode in this series, is exactly that when you make these blanket bans and you just say it can never be used ever, it doesn't provide an opportunity to use it, teach explicit purposeful use, and use it when you need to use it. That does not mean that we have students with completely unfettered cell phone access all day in the school. It's a happy balance. It's the centrist approach, coming to the middle of it.
And I had lunch with a tech director that lives around me, and he said, because we have a statewide ban on cell phones. And I said, how's it going? He's like, it kind of sucks. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And from his perspective, so the cloud storage in their district went up exponentially, because now kids have downloaded all of their discography, on their school issue drive, so they can listen to music during the day, because they can't bring in and
I
listen
didn't
to
think about
Spotify.
that.
And he said the number of Google Docs and slide presentations we have also gone up exponentially, because those have chat functions in them. So
they're
now
using it as a text message functionality.
Yeah. And so
yep.
I always joke, I don't joke. I mean, I'm kind of serious, but I'm like, when they talk about bans in general, and I am against kids being on social media, and I'm against parents texting their kids throughout the school day. Like, I'm not an insane person here. But I always make the reference. I'm like, oh yeah, because prohibition works so well. And so as he's telling me all these things, and I said, oh my God, they're bootlegging. Like, this is
they're
like, it goes along with my analogy.
That.
So kids are creative. You put them in a box and they figure out, where's the doors that you didn't see that were in that box. And that's all they're doing. So.
Yep. That's the problem. I always say, I'm like, when in the history of human life has completely banning something ended in a positive thing? We bootleg, we find ways to work around it,
I mean, humankind exists because we found ways to be creative and solve problems and to do things. Like, as a species, we wouldn't be on this earth if we weren't good at that.
It's true. Like cooking food versus eating everything raw. Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's a good point. That was a really great segue to our next topic. That was one story from a district leader of what their feelings are on cell phone bans. What are you seeing, hearing, talking to district leaders about this screen time conversation, both state legislation, district policies happening?
I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is right now everybody's focused on quantity, like screen time as a number, and that is never going to work. And we really need to be focusing on quality, the purposeful uses of that technology. So I really worry about that quantity piece, because 30 minutes a day of doom scrolling or watching nonsense YouTube videos in school is still too much screen time. but 30 minutes a day of working on building an AI policy with, fellow board members, it's not enough screen time. And so there's no nuance in that. We're not looking at the purpose. And I think that becomes a really tough sticking point. I did a webinar about a week and a half ago for the National Council of State Legislators with Rebecca Winthrop from Brookings Institute, and it was all about screen time. And these are state legislators across the U.S. that are, obviously hearing from their constituents about screen time and trying to decide, do I need to, propose a law or a law that they're literally looking at already? Is it good or not? And so, like, one of the questions that was asked at the end of that webinar was, what ratio of device to student do you think we should legislate? And I was like, none. Like, that's a local control decision. I'm like, because if you do 2-to-1, like, here's the negative consequences of that. Like, it's hard for a lot of people, and you're in Montana, and I'm not trying to stereotype Montana, but I know there's a lot of rural space in Montana. You don't have any major metroplexes.
No.
Beautiful state, and I hope you never get a major metroplex because it is such a beautiful state. There's a lot of virality, and with that often comes not quite as much affluence as you would see in a major city or a suburb of a major city type thing. And so there are large swaths of the US and families that their school issued device is their only device, their only way to get to that world outside. And so when you limit that, do you say, okay, well, we're 2-to-1, but these are my low SES kids, so they get to take a device home? Like, how do you do that? So you don't know who you're harming when you come up with those types of ideas and policies. Educators and administrators, like, I hear it all the time, they want to move to the quality piece and make sure that there's a purpose behind what they're doing with the technology in their district. But the general consensus in the media is it's a quantity piece, and even the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out and said it's not a quantity thing, it's a quality thing, because quantity is black and white, and it's easy to draw a line.
Legislate. It's easy to legislate.
It's exactly where I was going. It's easy to legislate, and quality requires professionalism and professional judgment. And so I think that's harder.
On that note, what would you say, in your experience working with ed tech leaders across the country, what gets in the way of that focus on quality and purposeful technology use? Like, what is shifting us to this focus on quantity, other than that fact that it's easy to legislate?
So I'm a pro ed tech. I have 3 children. They are adults, 2 grandchildren. And I think that if my children, when they were in school, had a negative experience, my kid came home from school and said, "Hey, Mom, I watched porn today on my school issued device." I'm having a completely different conversation with an administrator the next day than you and I are having right now. So I think we have had some negative experiences. I think that is harmful to us, and we need to address that. But I also think the biggest factor is just a lack of job embedded coaching around technology use and helping educators to see that they have the professional judgment to say, I'm going to use paper today because this is better for this activity, or I'm going to build this unit that's centered around an Apple Vision Pro, just to use the other end of the spectrum. And so I think we need to do a better job of doing that, and not having an expectation that every teacher uses technology. Going back to the gentleman that said, you can't say you're not good with technology if you're not allowed to say you're not good with English. Nobody just woke up and knew English. We taught them English. Like, we all learned English. So why don't we take the time to teach the people that are going to be doing the technology? And it has to be job embedded coaching. It can't just be a one and done PD session. So I think that's another problem that we're having. I always say, when it comes to data privacy, and it'll apply to this as well, your number one data privacy risk as a district is a great teacher making a bad decision for the right reason. And the same is happening with the technology. I'm a good teacher. I want to try something new. I don't know how. I'm just going to do it. And this was my consequence. And now, children have been impacted by it. So
on that note of data privacy, I think one of the most important and also underserved conversation in ed tech right now, and it connects directly to the screen time debate in a way that doesn't get talked about enough, is data privacy, security, and student safety. I know you're a fierce advocate for choosing edtech tools that prioritize those three things. Can you help listeners understand what's actually at stake in terms of data privacy? When you say that your greatest data privacy risk is a teacher making a bad decision for the right reasons, like what does that actually mean when a student's data isn't protected?
I just made a note to myself because I want to come back to one other point on this. So hopefully, if I don't come back to my point, you're like, "What's your note over there?" Say, Stacy. No offense, Lindy, but you and I, if our information is hacked, if it's stolen, if it's posted on the dark web, we're going to be lucky if somebody's going to pay a couple pennies for our IDs. If a kindergartner's information is stolen and posted on the dark web, that's worth about $350. And if you think about a school district that has hundreds of them, when that data gets stolen, it's detrimental. And it sounds crazy because we're normal people. And why would we even want to pay anything for a 6-year-old's ID? But that 6-year-old has no credit history. That 6-year-old likely has no credit monitoring unless their parents were savvy enough and started early. So I got 12 years. So I can do whatever I want with that kid's credit.
Mm.
And that kid's ID is clean. And so that becomes a really valuable ID that they can resell, that they can set up accounts on. And so it's not uncommon for somebody to graduate high school, to get close to graduating high school and try to fill out their FAFSA and realize they've already got loans out and they had no idea. And so that is a huge risk in schools. We have to protect that data. There are federal laws, including FERPA, which was designed before the iPhone and the iPad and the iPod and Facebook, that protect student data. What a lot of people don't realize, there's also other federal protections, and there are 40 states with data privacy laws as well, is that if a school issues a device to a student and signs up for the accounts, that school issued device and those school issued accounts have different data privacy protections than a personal device and a personal account. A student is safer using a school issued device and a Google account issued by the school than they are on a device that their parent bought them and an account that their parent let them have. And so they lose all those protections. That was the point I wanted to make sure I got back to. They lose all those protections on the home device. Because we're receiving federal funds in public education, they are better protected with the devices that we give them and the accounts. Now, that means that the IT folks need to be doing their cybersecurity checklist. They need to absolutely, my golden rule, number one, don't use an app without a data privacy agreement. They need to have data privacy agreements. I do know that there are several organizations that do a really nice job with the trusted apps list, or these are the good player apps list. That's fine. That is not a data privacy agreement. A data privacy agreement is a legal contract between a school district and a vendor that says, this is the data you can get. This is who can access. This is how it's protected. This is how you have to notify us if something goes wrong. It's a legal agreement between those two to protect student data. A trusted apps list is a great resource to start with, but that vendor can change their privacy policy the day after you read it on the trusted apps list, and they don't have to tell you. So you don't have those legal protections. So the people that have had data privacy agreements with Canvas, with PowerSchool, there's probably 12 others that are happening right this minute. They have different legal protections than the folks that just signed up to use those apps and took their terms of service with no additional things. So those things have to help keep kids safe. And that's what makes educational technology safer than consumer technology, even the same exact thing.
Interesting. I love that perspective. And what I'm hearing is, well, I'll say 15, 20 years ago, there was a big push for BYOD
Yeah.
initiatives, which, if you're not familiar, that stands for Bring Your Own Device
It means I'm too cheap as a
initiatives.
district to buy you a device.
Yes.
But that acronym didn't
And
sell. So
no, yeah, let's just say that it really didn't work for a lot of reasons. One of the big reasons was it's really hard as an educator to find
Yeah.
tools that work on an iPad and a Chromebook and a Mac and a Windows and a iPod Touch and a Android phone and name Kindles. Kindle Fires were out
Yeah.
there. That was one of the reasons that it didn't work. But another big reason is the security and data privacy aspect
Yep.
of it. I actually was having a conversation recently with some private school people, and it came up that a couple of them are BYOD still. And I was like, that's a thing that still exists. I mean, because public schools left that
Yeah.
behind a long time ago, and it didn't sound like it was going well. I have been hearing this BYOD just a teeny little bit like bubble up as a result to this screen time debate as like one of the solutions. And I'm like, no, 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 no.
No. There's
And you just explained
there's
really
plethora of
well one
issues
of,
with that.
yes, many issues that it's not a good solution. Not to mention, we talked about the data privacy security issues, the challenges for the teacher, but it's also an equity thing. There's a
Yeah.
huge, I mean, let's just think about it. Look at, you're sitting in a classroom and you've got a kid with a MacBook Pro and another one with a Kindle Fire.
Well, and
Equity issue.
so back when I was a tech director, I got a really neat opportunity. We got invited to Ohio State University because I was tech director in Ohio. And it was me and our superintendent at the time. And they had invited a handful of tech directors and superintendents from across the state. And they had a variety of deans and people talking to them about what they wanted out of students graduating high school in Ohio to be successful at Ohio State. And I don't know if they still have it or not, but at the time, Ohio State had a huge iPad initiative, and incoming freshmen were getting iPads so they could access their curriculum and all of those things. And he said the number one problem that they're having with their incoming freshmen was that they weren't prepared to learn in a digital ecosystem. And he said, I'll give you an example. So I'll use my daughter because I was tech director when my daughter was in high school. She had access to technology. The district had Blackboard, so she had some blended learning opportunities in her courses and things like that. And we had enough means to be able to provide her with her own device. So it wasn't a one-to-one situation back then, but she did have her own device. Compare that with a student whose family didn't have the means that we were able to have at the time and whose school district didn't have opportunities for Blackboard and blended learning and that type of stuff. He said, so suppose both of those students are academically qualified to be at Ohio State University. They're both accepted. They both come in and they're both sitting in Chem 101. And on the first day of class, one of them is prepared to learn in our ecosystem and the other one has no idea what's happening because they don't know how to get onto Blackboard to get to their course. They don't know how to access the content through the iPad because we don't have all the books and things like that. Said those are the students that are dropping out because they can't access the curriculum, not because they weren't academically qualified to be here, but they're not prepared for the ecosystem and the world in which they're currently living. And if they could fix one thing with Ohio schools, it was make sure you're preparing students for the world in which they live, not the world that you think you grew up in. And so that's 2010.
Dr. Michelle Eckler said the same thing a couple episodes ago
Yeah.
that University of Connecticut, she was talking to a person from there and they said one of their number one challenges is currently students are coming in as freshmen with wide varying AI literacy.
Yeah. And academically,
And
they're all in the same place.
yep, yep. So K-12 schools, we got to listen. We got to listen. I want to get to a practical question that I'm sure, especially if you're a teacher listening right now, you probably have. If you're a teacher and you want to try a new ed tech tool, maybe something you saw on social media, you went to a conference and you heard about it and it looked really great, what are the questions you should ask before you use it with students, especially as it relates to checking those data privacy, security, and student safety boxes?
Yeah. So the first thing you need to do is if you find an app at a conference, don't sign up. Don't give them your email address. Maybe don't even let them scan your badge. Take the free water bottle, take the trip on the boat and have a good dinner. Do what you need to do, but don't get an app from a vendor hall. We need vendors at conferences. We need an ecosystem where vendors and educators work together so that we're designing better products for students. I'm not anti-vendor. I'm anti-teachers making decisions at a vendor hall. We actually, the EdTech Leaders Alliance, and I'm happy to share it with you if you want, you don't have to, built a tool for teachers to literally walk through exactly this question. Like, okay, here's the things I need to know about data privacy and cybersecurity before I go. But then let's have a conversation with my tech coach or my tech leader or my curriculum coach or my curriculum leader. Does the app do these things? And if it does these things, let's talk about it. But you have to first get your curriculum team involved to make sure that it solves an issue that you're having. The average district has over 2,000 apps. I hear a lot of people saying, like, you might have 8 apps that do the same thing. You just need one. I actually disagree with that. I don't know that you need 8, but if there is one app that talks to this student who's been reluctant, I'm fine with one app working for one kid. I don't think you need to pick a one size fits all app. So I'm okay with more apps, but you need to make sure that it's solving a curriculum problem first. And that happens with your curriculum people. And then you need to make sure that your IT teams think it's safe. So does it have this data privacy agreement that they can get onto? Does it have the cybersecurity protections that they need? Will it work with the systems that you have? And then you can start to figure out where would we put this in the curriculum and then move forward. So I think just take the water bottle, take the ride on the boat, do what you need to do. You're a teacher, you worked hard. If you're going to ISTE this summer, you deserve it. Have fun, but don't get an app. Don't sign up for it today. Talk to the right people and make sure that you're making those protections. And our tool, again, it's freely available. You're welcome to share it or not. I will
Yeah, that'd be
share
great.
the link with you. Yeah.
I would love to have that as a resource. I'm going to write it down on my list here. We'll put the link in the show notes. I know that there are teachers listening because these are the teachers I work with every single day that are like, but we don't have a curriculum department. But my school doesn't have a process for when I come back from a conference and I learned about this awesome new tool that I really want to use with my students. We don't have a process to evaluate its data privacy standards. What do you tell that teacher that feels like their hands are tied?
I think the first thing I would tell that teacher is to go to the Student Data Privacy Consortium. You can get a free account there and you can search for an app's name to see if they've signed a data privacy agreement anywhere. So anybody can do that. So you're like, oh, I just found out about, Stella's ABCs. Okay, Stella's my granddaughter's name. Stella's ABCs at a conference. I think it's going to be great for this group of students that I teach. Go there and see if they've signed a data privacy agreement. If they have signed one, then they're going to be more likely to sign one with you or let you sign on to an existing agreement. So at least you have a starting place of who has them and who doesn't. Sometimes small startups with good privacy practices won't sign a data privacy agreements because they think there's too much legal cost involved on their end. There's really not, because if they're complying to sign, why do you need an attorney? But I think that's a good place to start. And if you don't have a curriculum department, then you are the curriculum department. So you know your students, you know what you're working with. And I think that gives you a little bit of leeway when it comes to that side of it. The reason I really recommend, if you have a curriculum department, making sure they're included, is you don't want to be making decisions in isolation. But if you don't have that and you have that authority, then go ahead and do, that's fine. But check the data privacy piece of it. That would be the number one thing that I would do first. And people don't realize, like, when you, like, an email address that has that's PII, student ID numbers, that's PII. Like, you can't literally do anything without almost giving out PII.
Yeah, it's tricky. There's a handful of tools out there that have like an anonymous go
Right.
to this link, put
Yeah,
in
you can do, there's an
code.
anonymous version of Kahoot and a couple others. I don't, yeah.
Yep. But if there's, I tell teachers, I'm like, if a student has to log in with their email, put in their full name, then you've got to back up and make sure
Yeah.
that tool is FERPA
If
compliant. And
you can, if you can see a dashboard that tells you how your kids are doing, there's PII in there.
yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned the Student Data Privacy Consortium. I will put a link to that in the show notes because that is a really great resource,
Yeah.
even for anyone that works in K-12 education. And there are states that are members of that. Montana is one of them. And so the way it works in Montana is and I'm assuming other states that are members of the STPC, it's similar. If a one tool signs Montana's state data privacy agreement that aligns with both federal data privacy and our state data privacy laws, it gets signed once, and then any school can go in there and you basically click a button and
Piggyback.
it creates a version of that data privacy agreement for your specific district. So
Yeah.
it makes that data privacy really, really easy, but it's also really fantastic, like you said, for evaluating tools and whether they are signing data privacy
Yeah.
agreements or not. So, yeah, really great tip there. Last question before we start wrapping up. I've been talking about the teacher perspective, but now I want to talk about the district leader perspective. If you're a district leader and you're the one making the procurement decisions for an entire district, what questions should be non-negotiable in that conversation with an ed tech company? Like, what are the things that companies should be able to answer clearly? And what does it mean if they don't have an answer?
Well, if they don't have an answer, then just move on. There's somebody else that's doing something very similar. You just need to look a little harder. So let's just start with that. Um, I think the thing that you need to look at from the district perspective really starts with conversations inside your district before they start with conversations with the vendor. So, what is it that my teachers are looking for? What is it that's lacking in what we have, and what do they need? And then when you're having conversations with vendors, you're bringing teachers in on those conversations so that they can learn how the tool works. Does the tool have training programs for teachers that they can get some real time training and job embedded training on that is going to be really important. Um, all of this is after, can we get a DPA? Do they have the right cybersecurity infrastructure in place? And there are actually some cybersecurity questions in the DPA from SDPC. So you do get some of that covered in there as well. But I think it really starts with listening to your teachers, listening to your students, and then talking to the vendor about your student population is like. If all they're doing is sending you cookie cutter information, whatever district you live in Montana is not nearly the same as Orange County School District in California, or in Florida. And so, are they really building a product that meets your students' needs? Is really important, and your teachers and your students are going to be really big helpers with that.
Yep, agreed. And I would add, if you're a school leader and you do not have, you kind of mentioned this earlier, a list of allowable technology tools and not allowable technology tools for your teachers, you need to. Any tool that, I really say technology tools because it's really a PII thing, right?
Yeah.
It's that data privacy. It's not data privacy, it's security, it's all that stuff. But your teachers have got to have that list that shows them these are allowable tools that pass our federal, state, local guidelines. And then these are tools that are not allowable. And add one more thing to that, technology constantly changes and there's constantly new tools. So you need to have a really clear process for if your teacher goes to that conference or if they go see something on social media or talk to a teacher in a fellow district and learn about a new tool that sounds like it would be really amazing and they want to try it with their students. You need to have a formal process set up where they can submit that tool and it goes through, like you were saying earlier, like that vetting process with the technology team to see, and the curriculum team as well, if you have a curriculum team at larger school
And
districts.
Lindy, I just put another link for you to put in the show notes if you're interested. But COSIN, along with Atlas, which is the Independent Schools, ISTE and ASCD,
Mm-hmm.
in April released a new responsible use agreement guiding document. It's called Setting Conditions for Success, Guidelines for Responsible Use for Technology in Schools. It's completely free. It's available to anyone. You don't have to be a COSIN member to access this. But it has some really good pieces in there that go along with this conversation to help schools, and it has some sample model policy in here as well too. So
Love it. All right, I will make sure to put that in the show notes as well. I've been asking every guest I've had on this series this question. If you are a district leader or a classroom teacher and you're listening to this and you are questioning your screen time, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes here, screen time use, and you want to make sure that you're using technology in really purposeful, powerful ways. What would you say to them? What would be the first step to take to move towards that?
Look at the curriculum. Does it align with our curriculum? Does it provide opportunities for access and extended learning for students? Everything needs to be done through that curriculum lens. There's no other way to start it. It's not about, because if you start it any other way, it's about quantity. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Even good use, I don't want to, oh, you have to spend 60 minutes of good use. Like, I don't want that either. Start with your content and then make sure that your teachers understand and have the capacity to use this tool. One of the cool stories from the book was a school district that was starting with some AI tools. And the superintendent said, this matters. And I want my teachers to know that this matters. So every time teachers were starting to use this tool, he would be in their classroom as a support person, and he would bring his lead technology person from the district with him so that they had an extra teacher who happened to be the superintendent and a technology person in there, because stuff went wrong every single time. And they wanted the teacher to feel supported, and they wanted the kids to see things go wrong, but we solve them together. And so how are you modeling that as well, I think is really important.
All right, Stacy, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been a great conversation. How can listeners connect with you?
They can follow me on LinkedIn. Stacy Haw is my LinkedIn. I mean, you can search for Stacy Hawthorne, but it's LinkedIn/my/Stacy Haw. I still have a Twitter account. You check it once a month or so. So maybe LinkedIn.
It's more than me.
Is good. But yeah, and I'm also, my day job is the director of the EdTech Leaders Alliance. So if you go to our website, edtechleadersalliance.org, all one word, I know it's a lot. My email, there's a contact us, and that sends an email to me as well. The EdTech Leaders Alliance serves as the home for the Ohio Coastal chapter. We're an ISTE partner, we're a CEDA affiliate, and we're also the Student Data Privacy Consortium Alliance for the state of Ohio as well.
We end every episode with a Make EdTech 100 moment. So this is like the last thing that you want to leave listeners with.
My Make EdTech 100 moment is going to be this. The question can't be, should students use technology? They already live in a world that's shaped by it. We need to ask the question, are we teaching them to use it with purpose? So let's be brave enough, please, to move beyond ban to embrace binary. Let's reduce what's harmful, design what's meaningful, and make sure that the technology that we keep in our schools is actually worthy of the students that we're educating.
That great Make EdTech 100 moment to leave with. Thank you, Stacy. It's been a great conversation. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Lindy. Appreciate you too.
Thanks for joining Make EdTech 100. I know educator time is valuable, and I'm honored you choose to spend yours with me. For more EdTech strategies you can use tomorrow and ways to bring me to your school or event, head to lindyhawk.com. If this episode resonated, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm Lindy Hawk. Go forth and make EdTech 100.